Welcome back to Today I Learned. I'm Dr. Johan, and on the show with me today is Baha Hilo, a Palestinian rights activist and educator, and we're talking about what lies at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So, Baha, over the past few decades, especially since Israel and Palestine started negotiating with the US, involved in the negotiations, there have been many attempts to quote-unquote resolve the conflict. Why have all these attempts at peace failed?
Because it's attempt at peace between the criminal and the victim. It's like, I want to steal your car, but then I want to have peace with you. And like, without having to give you the car, I might give you the trunk, and you should be very thankful that I'm allowing you to use the trunk. But then, of course, like, there's nonsense to you. Palestinian negotiators have been, giving up on Palestine piece by piece.
The United States, what they have been suggesting is a two-state solution to the conflict.
Yeah.
Is this the right approach?
No, the two-state solution is the right approach for the oppressors. The only difference about this new two-state solution is that in 1993 it had Palestinian approval.
Right.
In 1917, we had the very first two-state solution. We called that the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was about promising the assistance of the British government in creating a Jewish state in Palestine,
right,
while, considering the rights of the indigenous Palestinians who live there. So 2 states in Palestine, 1 for Jewish immigrants, 1 for Palestinians. It didn't work back then. The white papers in the 30s, the partition plan of Palestine is a plan for a 2-state solution. Actually, in Palestine, between 1949 and 1967, we had a 3-state solution. The Kingdom of Jordan ruled an area that we call today the West Bank of River Jordan. The Kingdom of Egypt ruled, and later on the Republic of Egypt ruled over what we call the Gaza Strip. And the State of Israel was in control of 78% of Palestine. So we had a 3-state solution. Like, those are not actual solutions that will bring justice to the Palestinian people and the oppressed people. Those are solutions to make the oppressed be thankful to their oppressors. When you actually put those things out of context, it's very easy to promote them. It's like, we want peace, we want peace, we want peace. And it's like, wanting peace between the State of Israel and Palestinians requires identifying who is the oppressor, who's the oppressed, and how can we bring justice to the oppressed.
I'm wondering about what role do superpowers like the US play in either resolving or exacerbating this issue?
So when it comes to superpowers, like, they are benefiting. The United States had a racist figure called Henry Kissinger. He served as a Secretary of State. Henry Kissinger in a private meeting said once that for every tank we give Israel for free, its neighbors buy 5. Only when it comes to the military industry, the United States benefits from the militarization and Israel benefits from the militarization. And you are only talking about militarization and weapons industry. So it's in the best interest of the United States. Now, the previous president of the United States, Barack Obama, before he left office, he committed the federal government to providing the State of Israel with $38 billion of weapons over the next 10 years. He left office. Who took over? Another president called Donald Trump. After he was sworn into office, Donald Trump went to the region. And he got contracts of more than $300 billion of weapons, to be bought by, the governments of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. So like when you just put what Henry Kissinger said in very few words and examine it in practice, you see like, oh, wow. For every $1 billion they give Israel for free, the neighbors by 5 billion, so they are benefiting. The division of Palestine was very useful for the British savages and the British colonizers, but they sought an opportunity of dominating the region and extract and steal resources from there by implanting some kind of foreign entity within it or in the heart of it. So it plays in the best interest of the superpowers. Now the inferior powers.
The small powers.
No, what they do is that they benefit in a different way.
Right.
So for the government of Singapore, they are one typical government that maintains diplomatic, economy, and military relations with the Israeli oppressor, but at the same time, they also provide support and recognition of the Palestinians. So what do those countries, like every country that has diplomatic relations with the State of Israel, what do? They benefit from the problem. Otherwise, they would not do this. Now, I don't care if they do this intentionally or not. When you support two sides of the exact same problem, the outcome of your support is maintaining the problem. So you just go on and maintain the problem because you benefit from it in terms of economy, diplomacy, and military. So it's not only the superpowers. And please be reminded, superpowers have never, ever led the way to justice. Superpowers have always led the world into destruction, not to justice. Who would lead to justice? Smaller countries. Like apartheid South Africa did not collapse because the United States decided fascist white people in South Africa, it's time for you to stop. No. The literature that you would read about, American literature you would read about their connection with South Africa is that we share the same values. I'm not shocked when I hear American defenders of Israeli criminal behavior to go on. So we share similar values with Israel. It's criminal values, racist values, values of supremacy. That's what you share.
Where do we go from here? Can there be peace and justice in Palestine? How do we go about it?
Of course. And I'm not saying, of course, there will be because I have the crystal ball. No, I can't see in the future. Of course, because I come from a place that was ruled by nearly 23 different oppressors in the past 6,000 years. Israeli criminals are the latest. They are not the only. I do not know where the Roman Empire is. I do not know where the Ottomans are. I do not know where, many countries or civilizations that started well and then turned out to be vicious and criminal and corrupt and so on and so forth. So the State of Israel has the same fate. What happened to the people who benefited from the criminal behavior of those past civilizations? They were assimilated. The Palestinian population is very diverse for one very simple reason. We're the grandchildren and of ancestors that, have lived there for centuries. And whether I know many Israelis will feel oh my God, no, our great-grandchildren will become Palestinian. It's the moment Israeli fascism collapses, it will take 3 generations for the children and grandchildren to assimilate. For that to happen, Israel's criminal behavior has to stop. For that to be allowed, Israel's apartheid has to come to an end. So I do believe in a future where the different Palestinian groups will, continue to coexist, But for that to start, we need to look beyond Israeli apartheid and fascism. Also, there is another thing. Palestinians were expelled all over the world. We exist everywhere. We're not allowed to practice freedom and be home, but we are everywhere.
Right.
Like in Berlin, for example. There are many Palestinians who are in Berlin, Germany. They walk on the same street as Jewish Israelis. There are Jewish Israelis in Germany. There are Palestinians in Berlin, Germany. Why you don't see any conflict between them there? It's very simple. They both stand equal before the same law. So why is it possible in Berlin, Germany? And I say Germany because Germany is famous for the extermination of 6 million Jewish people, right? And a Jewish man can walk the streets in Germany with all respect.
Right.
So it is possible elsewhere, but for elsewhere, it had a different element, justice, you know? Imagine having to ask a Jewish person to go to Germany where, you know, the fascist norms of Germany are still in place.
What would a peaceful, democratic Palestine look like? Could we see a sort of a Palestine that is democratic, a secular state where the people of Palestine, the Arabs, Jews, and others could live alongside each other just like they did before the British occupation after the First World War?
You say Arab and Jews if they are opposites. You know there are Arab Jews.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The state of Israel succeeded in eliminating them because, like, imagine you being an Arab Jew. The state of Israel induced this thing in your mind that there is a conflict between Arabs and Jews. So you have to choose, you know? Of course, like, if you have several identities and you have to choose one of them, your choice will be wrong. Like, I have to choose between being an Arab and a Palestinian. And it's like, whatever I choose is wrong. You have to choose between being Irish or American. You know, whatever I choose is wrong.
Right.
African and American. And it's like, no. The racist mind cannot get the multiple cross-generational identities, you know? But it's okay, because the racist mind is stupid, you know?
Absolutely.
So, how would it look like? First of all, like, we have to speak about implementing the rights of the Palestinian people. Those rights are several. You know, first of all, they have to be allowed to go home safely. Second of all, like any oppressed population, the oppressed are entitled to reparations and compensations. Those who are responsible for this atrocity have to be held accountable. Racialist societies always were trained to think that equality for the privileged will always feel like oppression. Now, we need apartheid in South Africa because if we give blacks their political rights, they will have an apartheid regime that will destroy us. We have to keep the slaves because if we give them freedom, they will enslave us. My favorite is the norm to justify denying women the right to vote. We should not allow them the right to vote because they will force us to wear dresses. You know, that was like one of those norms. So, in the context of Palestine, those things are, you know, possible, but Israelis are made to believe, Jewish Israelis are made to believe that the moment Palestinians return, they will eat us, or they will, you know, throw us into the sea, wipe Israel off the map. These are the main popular fears. But once again, where do these fears come from? Like, because the Israelis know exactly. They met 14 million Palestinians and they asked them, what will you do when you come home? And they told you that they will do 1, 2, 3. Or you just decided that they will do exactly what your ancestors have done against them. The fear that is happening does not come from me. It comes from the ancestors and the founders of the State of Israel. It comes from the criminal behavior that was imposed upon the Palestinian people. Palestine was wiped off the map. You look at the world map in 1947, you see Palestine there. So we know now all the ways that prevent us from coming to peace and justice in Palestine. So we need to try the one thing that left.
Before we wrap this conversation up, would you have a final message or some final thoughts for us, especially with regard to what the international community, especially working class people, how can they lend their support to the Palestinian cause?
First of all, like, think of the Palestinian survivors of Israeli oppression as survivors of Israeli oppression. Like, we are born subject to oppression, we will die subject to oppression. Just like people are made to think of slavery as those 2 seconds that went on for 400 years and Lincoln came and stopped it. They were blind to the savagery of, you know, slavery. You're witnessing the savagery that Palestinians have been subject to, and you're also, many people go on normalizing this evil norm of blaming the victim, you know? So many people hold Palestinians responsible for the criminal behavior they've been subject to, because blaming the victim is still normalized. We're not of a higher nor of an inferior value than anybody else. Second thing, be reminded, you know, everyone is born free and equal. The precondition for my freedom and equality is not my behavior. My very existence, that is the precondition. So learn, be aware, and fight oppression where you see it, wherever you see it. Do not support Israeli businesses. Like, I would be happy if people support my oppressor because he's my oppressor. But when you support my oppressor despite of his oppression of the Palestinian people, then that puts you on an inferior level. So just please be aware that do not be dragged into making business with Israeli firms and Israeli oppressors despite of their criminal behavior towards the Palestinian people. Just keep that in mind.
And on that note, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
That was Baha Hilo, a Palestinian rights activist and educator. If you missed any part of our conversation, you can also check us out on podcasts. We are available on the BFM app, bfm.my, but you can also subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or pretty much wherever you get your podcasts from. You just have to search Today I Learned Podcasts. I'm Darshan Johan, and this has been Today I Learned, BFM 89.9.